Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ben Friedman here with my last ride with one of my favorite standard decks. We're going to be battling today with four color Emerge, Dredge, Sultai Emerge, depends how you want to look at it. This deck is a lot of fun. It is extremely complicated, and I look forward to battling with it every time I get the chance, so I'm excited to battle with it in a league for you all today. We're going to go over the deck list real quick before we get started. The mana base is fairly straightforward. We got obviously 4 Evolving Wilds, and then 4 Forests, 2 Island, 2 Swamp. This helps us with our mana fixing because we've got obviously a lot of demanding cards with demanding mana costs. We've got 3 Llanowar Wastes, 3 Sunken Hollows, 4 Yavimaya Coasts to help us ensure that we are going to be able to cast our spells with relative consistency. The most difficult ones are Languish and Elder Deep-Fiend, of course, with the double blue and double black in their costs, as well as Distended Mindbender. You need to have a green source, obviously, in order to get the engine started, but usually after the first one, the second and third are occasionally unnecessary. But we've got Traverse the Ulvenwald here, which is a very, very key component of the deck's mana base, in that any hand with a green land and a Traverse is basically set up to play the game, which is excellent. The other thing about Traverse is that in the late game, it just turns into a string of Elder Deep-Fiends. We're going to end up traversing for Elder Deep-Fiend, and then we can get another one via Grapple with the Past or Jace flashing back Traverse. It just starts to get really out of control. Once you get the engine started, you have Vessel of Nascency as kind of a 2-of to just help you with a little bit of your consistency. It also is nice for Delirium to make the Traverse turn on. We have 4 copies of what I think is the most powerful card in the deck. This deck abuses Jace extremely, extremely well. Jace, it does it all in this deck. On turn 3, you very frequently can flip it. All you really need to do that is an Evolving Wilds on turn 1, into a land and a Jace on turn 2, into a Grapple with the Past on turn 3. That will flip your Jace, because then your Jace will tap, and that'll be the important 5th card. You can also do this with a Gather the Pack on turn 3, or a Vessel on turn 1 into a Jace on turn 2 into blowing up the Vessel on turn 3. Jace is an all-star in this deck because on turn 3 it can bump up to shut down an opponent's creature, and then on subsequent turns you're going to start traversing for Elder Deep-Fiends or Prized Amalgams or Haunted Deads and start the loop, and the Jace will allow you to run out the Elder Deep-Fiend chain for at least 2 turns via more traversing. Gather the Pack is an awesome card. You sometimes whiff with it, which sucks, but you very rarely do. And kind of like a collected company for this deck, it just does so much for us. Grapple with the Past, very similar. It's another excellent card in this deck, huge for enabling all of our starts, increases consistency. So you see we're only running 22 lands here, but with Grapple with the Past and Traverse the Ulvenwald, it's like we have access to 30 mana sources. We've got 4 Kozilek's returns that we can't actually cast, but we desperately want to get them into the graveyard so that our Elder Deep-Fiends can be Wrath of God effects as well as Time Walks. We have Nissa Vastwood Seer is a 1-of. I replaced the Ishkana with Nissa because I wasn't finding that I was ever actively seeking out an Ishkana, but Nissa is awesome for helping you get to 4 or 5 lands, as well as being a source of gas in the late game. Prized Amalgam is super nice because it allows some of your super busted starts with Haunted Dead. Haunted Dead is a huge component of the engine here. Very frequently, your best possible starts involve getting a Haunted Dead into the graveyard via a Jace, or via a Gather, or via a Grapple, or via a Vessel. Once it's in the graveyard, you discard Prized Amalgam to it, and the Prized Amalgam will come back at the end step for free. You can discard Kozilek's Return to it, and then sacrifice the Haunted Dead to a 3-mana Elder Deep-Fiend. So you actually only end up spending 5 mana total, 2 to reanimate your Haunted Dead, and then 3 for an Elder Deep-Fiend to merge. And yeah, so for 2 black, blue, blue, you can frequently end up tapping all your opponent's lands, sweeping their board, and getting a 5/6 as well as a 1/1 spirit. And then at the end step, any prized amalgams that were in the graveyard will incidentally return. We have Languish is a backup sweeper in addition to Kozilek's Return. I like the fact that it gets around opposing Archangel Avacyn's or opposing Selfless Spirits, as well as increasing the consistency with which you hit a sweeper. Sometimes you don't hit one of your Kozilek's Returns, or sometimes it's stuck in your hand, and Languish is nice as insurance for that. It's also important to note that with Jace, you're frequently flashing back Languish, even if you mill it with Grapple or Gather. Your hand is sort of a half in your hand and half in your graveyard with this deck. So by operating with your graveyard as a second hand, it means that you really have 6 sweepers that can, at various points in time, be usable from your graveyard. We have 1 Distended Mindbender in here as kind of our bullet instead of Elder Deep-Fiend. It's a 5th Deep-Fiend. It's not excellent, but it does the job, and if your Elder Deep-Fiends all get exiled via an Infinite Obliteration, you sometimes need the Distended Mindbender to bring back Kozilek's Return in order to win the game. And you sometimes just have to drag it across the finish line with multiple Prized Amalgams and Haunted Dead. That being said, we can take a peek at the sideboard now. The main deck, we're just going to have to see it in action for you all to believe how good it is. In the sideboard, we have Stitchwing Skaab, which is a replacement for Haunted Dead, just in case your opponent exiles all of your Haunted Dead. You need a creature that you can use to reanimate Prized Amalgam, as well as be fodder for cheap Elder Deep-Fiends or Distended Mindbenders. I have 3 Transgress the Mind in here. Excellent card for battling against control decks or mid-range decks. It's nice that you can bring it back with Jace. You can also bring it back with Den Protector, which is another piece of my sideboard game plan. We have 1 Pick the Brain, 2 copies of To the Slaughter, 2 copies of Infinite Obliteration. Infinite Obliteration is excellent in the mirror match or against T-Merge. 1 Gilt-Leaf Winnower, which is important for beating Kalitas, and you can tutor it up with Traverse. 2 Pulse of Murasa for aggro decks or the blue-red burn deck. And 1 Mountain. We sideboarded in against White Weenie or like Bant Spirits, decks that are vulnerable to the front half of Kozilek's Return, where you might actually want to cast it. And the 1 Mountain is pretty easy to find. You have Evolving Wilds, you have Traverse, you have Jace for Traverse, you have Grapple with the Pest in case it gets milled. And you have Vessel of Nascency. So you actually have a decent number of ways to find it. But yeah, I'm super excited to battle with this deck, and I hope you all are too, because I really want to show off how powerful this is before the 2 of the huge enablers in Jace and Gather the Pack rotate out of Standard, and we don't and Languish also, unfortunately, and we don't necessarily get to see this shell in all of its glory anymore. So let's get right to it.